Yeah.
Me neither.
Very cool. Yeah.
Okay.
On my radar.
It's been very good.
Now, do they meet during the summer typically too? No.
We don't.
Okay.
And now they're due
Hey, Paul?
the Boy Scouts.
Yes, sir.
Have you got an
They don't
iPhone
meet
too?
in the summer either.
Yes.
Okay.
Complete Apple man.
I bought my first Apple computer in 1984.
You go back a ways.
That was the toaster, wasn't it?
Because that first,
The first Macs
It
were
looked like a toaster.
the first
love
Macs
that.
were only 128K, and I was a Unix grunt at the time, and I knew 128K wasn't enough. So as soon as the Fat Mac came out, 512K, I bought one.
that's back in the days when the Commodores had 128. Oh, the Commodores had 64.
64.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, my first
Hey, I just saw your actual picture. It's actually a piece you have.
kind of at least semi-portable computer was an Osborne.
Oh, me too.
Weighed 28 pounds.
I remember that.
Had his,
Oh, Sean, how you doing?
Good. How are you this evening?
I feel like I'm sort of not.
I don't want to shake hands with anybody or get too close to anybody. I don't know what I've got.
Are you
Whatever it
sick?
is, it's not very
Oh,
nice.
no.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I was gonna say maybe I'll go
Aren't you
this
glad I'm sitting
direction.
up here with you?
There you go.
yeah, I'm fully recovered.
I was gonna say
think
we
I'll
have
take
we
it.
have been good this year. I don't know. We have had some years
wanna take
that
a
have been
chance.
juicy.
This is the first year.
I'm sorry, say again?
You could scoot over
Anything.
a little to the end of the table.
All right.
Several years. Yeah.
That's probably not a bad idea.
You're fine.
He says you're fine.
Hey, Paul, I got my own. I'm tired of not being able to use it.
Exactly. That's what I did.
Yeah, I noticed that. I'm following your lead.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 25th Washougal City Council Workshop meeting. Jennifer, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Plinsky.
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee.
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel.
Here.
Councilmember Boger.
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman. And Councilmember Lindsay.
Thank you. We did have notifications from council members Lindsay and Connie Jo that they would be absent this evening. As we get started, are there any members of the public that would like to address council this evening? Only your first opportunity. There'll always be another one. Okay, moving on to the first item this evening, presentation regarding the development agreement with Port of Camas and Washougal. Pitch.
Thank you, Your Honor, Council. The Port of Camas Washougal has made application for a development agreement for the Steigerwald Commerce Center. This agreement between the Port and Council sets up the rules and regulations and standards for approximately 125 acres of heavy industrial zone property at the east end of their existing industrial park, up on the big screens now. A draft of the development agreement has been provided to you, as well as all the exhibits associated with that were provided via the Dropbox. Those exhibits included the legal description, phasing plan, traffic analysis report, a lotting plan, a SEPA checklist, street design, sanitary sewer and water plans, stormwater plan, and development standards. Now, these development standards that the Port is subjecting themselves to vary a bit from our heavy industrial code. First of all, they have design review, and they set up established a design review committee that will review their proposals in light of their code, of their standards, in addition to city review. And also, like previous development agreements, it will vest them. It'll vest them to the standards and codes in place that we have today. This is a very exciting project for the Port and for the city, and I think it'll go a long way for good, strong economic development within our community. As this is your work session and for the scheduled hearing coming up in March, this is your time to ask any questions that you may have related to the development agreement. And with that, we have Tim Schauer, who's President and CEO of McCain's Bozito, Aaron Toman is also with McKay and Esposito, and of course Dave Ripp, the Executive Director for the Port of Kamis-Washougal, to answer any questions that you may have. Turn it to Tim, if you have any things.
Again, Tim Schauer at McKay Esposito. We represent the port, have been doing so for a number of years on this project in particular. And I recognize this is a somewhat complex project, timing and efforts that have taken us to this point. A lot of water under the bridge, no pun intended. And I would like to be available to answer any questions you might have. Having done many land use hearings over my career, I have learned to offer two choices. I have the long version. I can give you background and information, or I can take the short version and respond to questions, being respectful of your time. But in light of a hearing coming up in March, we are prepared to go back and present whatever detail or answer any questions you might have. And this is an opportunity for us to make sure that when we come to the hearing in March, we are well prepared. So if there are things that give you concern, things you'd like more detail on, or would like us to walk you through some of this, we're more than happy to do that. Aaron Tolman with me has participated in great detail through this project from start to finish, and I have been helping guide the vision since we started, along with port staff. So, do you have any specific questions, or maybe as to how we got where we are, or anything along those lines?
Council, Paul?
I just wanted to say that, to underline something that Tim said, is that there has been a public process underway at the port for years. And through that process, I've gained great respect for Dave and the staff at the port, and for Tim and the people at McKay and Esposito, and a number of other consultants who have worked on this project. This was an amazing process. So I'm pretty well up to speed on what happened and what we have here on the table. But I just wanted to let people know that this has not been a darkroom process, that this has happened very publicly in public meetings at the port and public outreach sessions and focus groups and so forth that go back at least 3 years in my memory, and actually longer than that.
Yeah, we started the visioning process in 2009, and we're actually the second team that's worked for the port. There was an initial process sometime before that, maybe another 3 or 4 years before that. But given some changes at the port and some new vision, we helped the port embark on a very public process to come up with a vision for the property. And part of that vision was to ensure that the property had a development standards approach, that properties there were developed with a certain vision in mind, a little higher development standard to attempt to attract a little more consistent higher-end tenant should the market provide for that. With significant public investment being made, the port will expend significant dollars in building infrastructure, and in some case, all we already have in terms of phase one. The effort is to expend those dollars in such a manner that it'll provide some predictable consistency, so that I've worked on several industrial parks of this scale and larger, and the greatest challenge is to convince the first few tenants to develop at a little higher standard when there's nothing else around them to see at that same standard. And if you let the first few come in at a little lower standard, it becomes very, very difficult. It sets the tone for the entire project. I guess in parallel, I'm on the board at the Economic Development Council, the Columbia Economic Development Council, and our Lands for Jobs Committee has a very short list of available shovel-ready land. If we complete this process and we're able to plat the rest of the property through a later subdivision process, this will represent the largest contiguous shovel-ready industrial employment land in Clark County. So Washougal will be at the tip of the spear, as I heard someone describe it, in terms of available property. Now, certainly it's a different market than most markets in the county. Every place has its own niche, but this is unique. One of the other, I guess, motivating strategies is the Port of Kamis-Washougal has been in a position to not respond to market requests for property. They have not had shovel-ready dirt available to respond to inquiries for new employers or for current employers to expand. And approval of this project long-term will give the port inventory to respond. This project is set up also to not necessarily just follow the path the port has in the past, where they would develop and hold. This project is set up specifically to permit the port to make land sales as well as retain ownership, build buildings and lease them. But should someone come along who wants fee simple ownership, they can do that as well. And the development standards enable all property owners within this project to conform to the same standard, rather than relying on the port to own it all and control through land lease. So we've tried to prepare for most possibilities. We completed in 2010 this visioning process, and then we spent a lot of time and effort between now and then to make sure we understood all of the infrastructure and utility needs that would be able to come forward to you with some predictability.
Jennifer?
Yes, I actually have a question regarding the development standards. I see in the table that you use, you have proposed uses shall be either permitted, conditional, or prohibited, as shown in the table that you provided. But I see permitted, conditional, and restricted with design review committee approval. What is actually prohibited?
So our approach to uses, and it's probably an area that the port and the city staff have been talking about extensively, there's nothing proposed within these standards to be allowed that's not already allowed within this district. There are uses that are allowed within this district in the city code that would not be allowed in the port's property. The port has tried to eliminate the availability of some of these uses just to ensure their employment goals. Additionally, those that are, I go back, I don't have it off the top of my head, those are restricted and subject to review within the city's code would outright be allowed by the city under this process, but subject to a design committee review. As an analogy, the Columbia Tech Center project, which we also worked on for a number of years, retirement living facilities are a conditional use in that zone. But through a development agreement and some initial environmental documents, you allow them outright, but subject them to the design review committee's approval, so that when a tenant comes along who's many of these uses are only allowed as conditional use, they know at this property, they can go through that process much quicker. It presents the property being more competitive. But there is the conditional, and if I get that correct, conditional and restricted uses are subject to the design review committee's review as opposed to the city's review. That was our goal.
Thank you.
I say the uses are one of the most significant elements of the development
Definitely.
agreement.
Go ahead.
Dave?
Who constitutes the design review team?
It's a good question. Currently, it would be the port, and it describes in the development agreement who would populate the design review committee. But the intent is that this design review committee and the property development survives the port's ownership. So over time, a good analogy would be a homeowners association where the original developer starts it and populates it, but as ownership of the properties transition to fee ownership, it could ultimately be populated by tenants or by other professionals hired by the association, an architect, engineer, or their delegate. It's intended to really, what I really like about this document is it doesn't rely on the port's ownership to achieve its vision and goal. But there's a description within the development agreement, I don't have it committed to memory, as to there are a couple of areas of expertise that would populate the DA. Mitch, did you have that?
Yeah, it's comprised of 4 port staff members or designee who have sufficient experience to review site planning, landscape design, stormwater management, and sustainable development. The DRC may also choose to include a design professional under contract with the port. And then to what Tim is saying about it sells, that it says that the Steigerwald Commerce Center site, if it's sold in its entirety, a design professional hired by the new owner shall review proposed development for compliance with these development standards.
Is a sustainable development requirement required by the state?
So I can jump to an answer, but I want to be real clear. When you say sustainable, how are you defining sustainable?
How are you defining it? It says right in there, sustainable development.
I'd say sustainable for us is continuing development in perpetuity, not sustainability in the environmental
Okay,
trended
that's all I need
sense.
to know. Thank you.
sustainable economy as opposed to sustainable choices. One of the real challenges that we are trying to overcome here related to the things like the Oversight Committee or the Design Review Committee. Port of Kaminista-Washougal, speaking for them somewhat, ports can be challenged making significant investments like this, that all their capital gets tied up. So and it has to stay there until the property completely turns over. So one of the goals in setting the system up with the development agreement is that if someone wanted to come along and purchase the property and develop it and purchase it from the port, they would be bound by this agreement as well. Then the port could move that capital onto other purchases, other investments within the community. So we're trying to navigate this process so that it works well for whoever, works effectively for whoever the owner is. But the port certainly is intending to, has no foreseeable purchasers, but wants to make sure that it isn't relying just on them or the current commission.
Thank you.
Well, I have to say that some of these provisions in this agreement sound very familiar. In fact, I think I might have written some of them in other agreements. But I had a couple of questions of things that kind of caught my attention and interest. What about utilities? What does the agreement provide? I know what I think it says about utilities, but what is your concept of that?
I'd be real candid. I wish I had more. There is no vesting of sewer or water capacity. Although we have an agreement to continue to work to plan for. One of the reasons there's some development agreements like this, if I didn't have vesting of capacity, I wouldn't include anything in the agreement. But given that this is the majority of the vacant employment lands within the city, the idea that we're forecasting uses and we have a development configuration for the life of this project, that gives the city the information they need to plan capacities. There's commitments to agree to work on providing capacity, particularly related to water capacity. Phase 4 on the map includes some wellhead areas that have been invested in by the city of Camas and Washougal for future well opportunities. So there's no agreement, as I understand, between the port and the cities about how that capacity gets allocated or who owns it, but there's an agreement to work on generating that capacity. So those relate to the sewer and water provisions. There's no vesting. However, and on the stormwater, we can't vest standards.
Well, that's been debatable, hasn't it?
Sure. We think our agreement says to vest to the extent possible. What is established in the agreement, though, is probably the gap in time between the end of 2010 and present. We spent almost 2 years working with the Corps of Engineers to confirm the stormwater solution for the area. Since the entire area is behind the dike and subject to the port's pump station, the idea of whether we have to do detention or not was significant. After having the Corps of Engineers and the port partnered on a hydrologic study to confirm that the pump facilities and the basin assumptions that created that system in the 60s, and they were modified again in the 90s, that the system that's currently there has the capacity and to handle the reality of today versus the assumptions 50 years ago. We had fundamental concern. We expressed to the port that we didn't want to move forward with any more planning and design until we were confirmed that the stormwater utility had a solution. We couldn't get this far and spend a bunch of money, and then turned out someone said, no, you can't do that. So in the agreement, there's a letter from the Corps of Engineers. They conducted the study. We've confirmed that. And there'll be no detention. So we only have a treatment solution here. And then the water all conveys from the site to the canal, which goes to the pump station. And there's been some concern about that publicly. Well, no detention. Well, the detention's intent is to prevent flooding. Well, if the entire channel is subject to a mechanized pump station, you don't have detention. And the best example locally is if you can get your water directly to the Columbia, you don't have detention. And at Lacamas Lake, you don't have detention. Since Lacamas Lake is a dam-controlled elevation, projects developed around the lake, they treat and then release without worrying about flooding.
So Tim, that has been confirmed now that is a solution, and the federals have signed off on that?
So
the Corps of Engineers?
I'll answer that question carefully. We have affirmation from the Corps of Engineers that the pump station has capacity for the forecast flow. They ran the model initially on their assumptions back in the 60s. They took our current development plan, they ran through a model, showed that it conveys, and they basically assessed when the pump station would fail. if we released all the water here. The elevation's higher than everything that exists. So basically, the pump stations work if everybody's underwater. Well, we know that, so really, they're telling us that the station's adequate. We know, in the way we're going to lay out the stormwater and elevations of the pads, that we won't have flooding at that level. But, and we've, the report and memo, it's a little detailed, but that the basis of our application is no detention. Although the city staff and the port and us are certainly careful to understand that Department of Ecology plays a role in that, and that we can't commit them to reinterpreting their rules later.
Right.
So our plan is, you don't see any big jump. Those blue areas are delineated wetland areas. We don't have plans for ponds here.
And that confirmation is for all 4 phases?
So everything behind the dike.
Okay.
So, and you're probably not going to find the most comforting language there you'd love to have, but I feel it's a far, far cry from where we were 3 years ago, where everybody says, this is the assumptions made, and this is how the system works, and that's how it should continue to work.
And does Fish and Wildlife have any input on that?
When you say Fish and Wildlife, you mean the state Fish and Wildlife, or you mean federal Fish and Wildlife?
Federal Fish and Wildlife with the refuge. I had a conversation with them probably a month ago, and they believed that it still wasn't settled exactly how all of that would move forwards.
Everything we do will be subject to an environmental, site-by-site environmental statement, and have the opportunity to comment. If I could predict what DOE would say,
I'm even going to ask you to do that.
I'm not a betting man, but I think we have gone to the greatest extent possible. That the city and the port are in alignment as to what the design solution should be. The elevation of water in the channel does not go up and down based on stormwater, developed stormwater. It goes up and down based on the pump station. And when the river level's below the pump station, it drains out by gravity. The river level comes up high enough, the pump station has to come on to push water over. There are a great number of issues to work out with Fish and Wildlife related to the maintenance of the facilities that go to the pump station, but that's probably a conversation for a different time. Is that helpful?
Yep.
I've got some more questions, but for staff.
Tim, thank you.
Absolutely.
Dave, did you have anything that you wanted to?
I just wanted to. Hi, Dave Ripp, Executive Director for the Port. Tim had made mention of when in the beginning portions of development of the site, bringing in and trying to sell to the newest tenant. We need to make this building look the best, so your grand entrance into the park and in future developments, people will feed off of that. The port's taking the lead on that right now. We're under engineering design for a 22,000 square foot building for an expansion project for Foods and Season. And that building will be the first building on that site. So it's our goal to make it look like a pristine, nice looking building. And if you look at it in comparison to what Foods and Season has now, I mean, they have a very nice, sleek, professional looking building. And you would never know that, fish, vegetables, and everything's being processed right inside that plant as we speak. So our goal, we're going to take the lead on building that first building and making sure it looks nice out there, and it's going to meet the standards that we've set in regards to our development agreement.
Cool.
So.
Questions for Dave? Mitch, you're back up.
My turn?
You're
Okay. Is this agreement, maybe this is also for the Mr. City Administrator, what does this agreement say about our utility predicament here? Are we going to be committing ourselves to something that is going to aggravate the problem we already have?
I don't believe so.
No.
And why is that?
Because we're not vesting any capacity. We'll continue to work on that. We need to make sure that we're a good partner for the port so that we're available to serve them when they need to be served. But we are not locking up all of the capacity that we currently have, or the majority of the capacity that we currently have, until we can work through those issues. So the capital facilities plans that we have in place, and particularly around water supply, and I think Tim alluded to this, on the Phase 4 area on the map, in our water system plan that's out 20 years, that is the source that is available to us, and as well as Camas, and there's already been some exploration that's been done out there. And so that is in the hopper already, but it's 20 years out. It's not informing current rates, and it would, except for some of the very initial work that would be associated with bringing water rights online there, which is, as you know, a long process. Some of the initial work is built in already. So it's not an exacerbating situation in the short term to continue to be able to deliver services out there and to work
Is
towards.
sewer an issue at all?
I am not aware that sewer is an issue. I don't believe that that was the case. But we, as Tim mentioned, we weren't, I don't believe that the port was in a position to provide the kind of specificity that would be necessary to vest what would be vested. And we suppose we could have looked at some lower level of vesting for, you know, some of the initial phases. But in good faith, we'll continue to work through those issues together. But we believe we'll be able to serve the port.
I also noticed that there's some contemplated annexation
Correct.
here. And the idea is that this development agreement would be recorded against the property, and then it would be recorded against, including property outside of the city limits, but it wouldn't be effective until.
Till annexation occurs,
Okay.
correct.
Okay. And this is maybe beyond the scope of what we should be discussing, but I've had this esoteric debate with Randy Prince for probably 10 years about development agreements and their ability to vary our zoning ordinance. There's been kind of I've had a change of heart on that, and I think they can if you do it right. But does this vary? I know it's more more restrictive. I think Tim said it was more restrictive than what our current zoning ordinance allows in that zone district. But is there anything that this development agreement would permit that our zoning code would not allow?
No, and procedurally, I think the difference that you'll see with this as opposed to the other development agreements that we've done, the other ones that we've done by resolution. This one we're adopting by ordinance. That's the legislative action that needs to take place in order to vary from the standards. So that's what will be before you in March.
And you got some advice on that?
I did got some good legal advice on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Brent, the one thing I would add is there are small little things in development standards. For example, parking size. Those are a little smaller than traditional Washougal big stall. And one of the reasons is it's pretty standard other places, but also there's an attempt to minimize the amount of impervious surface down here in general. So I think we're 9 by 18 instead of 10 by 20 or something. And those are specifically included in the development standards, so that the goal being that this ends up hopefully being consistent for the life of the project as opposed to.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I thought it was taking your comment from a use standpoint, or is there things that we're restricting from a use standpoint? And that answer is no. But yes, there are differences within the development standards. Like Tim mentioned, there are landscaping, there's requirements, setbacks are different, are varying. But those kind of things that all taken in totality out there with the development site and getting those standards in place and that review done, it gets a much better cohesive project.
PUD kind of
Exactly.
concept. Okay, well, I'm going to listen to the public hearing when we have it, but I think this is a good development agreement, and I'm very excited about the port moving forward with this. And so, unless someone says something at the public hearing that completely changes my mind, I'm inclined to support it.
Other questions, comments from council? Mitch, I've got one on processing. You started to pick up on it a little bit. I noticed under the Section 18, the public hearing, that we are going to be adopting this by ordinance, not just the agreement.
Right, the ordinance.
Why is it that we do it?
Because the ordinance is the action that is the legislative action that allows you as a council, much similar to how you adopt codes citywide. It allows you to adopt the code sections that are modified, that this agreement is modifying our current code. So that the ordinance itself is what's going to facilitate that to occur.
It needs to be done by ordinance, so it has equal stature with the zoning code. If it doesn't have equal stature with the zoning code, then the zoning code.
Have we done that before? It
No.
just seems odd that we're gonna actually
Interestingly enough,
include an
no,
agreement
the
into the
last
city laws.
Yes, the last development, all the other development agreements were, no, they were just, because we weren't varying from any of the standards. We were actually vesting to the standards in place. We didn't change anything. So they're just the way that they are. Interestingly enough, the one development agreement that I've seen here in the city that was for the Safeway complex, Evergreen Marketplace, that was actually adopted by resolution only, and it did change some things, so I wasn't comfortable with that. But based on legal review that we've had, and I, like Brent, have had many discussions with Randy Princes of the world about what you can and cannot do under with the development agreement. And this is, I'm getting consistent legal advice now that this is the way to do it by ordinance adoption.
So obviously, the agreement doesn't become part of our city code, but is there a footnote in the
uncodified.
zoning or
It's
something?
it's
that
uncodified
goes back to?
ordinance.
Yeah, it's just, it's referenced.
Interesting.
I would add, Sean, this was not a level of development standards that was passed forward by the port and staff sort of rubber stamped it. A lot of dialogue, actually, and I think I would sort of venture to say the development standards represent a zoning code we'd like to
Yeah.
have. And I don't think, Mitch, are there other other vacant industrial zones within the city of this type?
Just that the other port, that the port property has to the west, though.
So in some ways, this is the only vacant property left under this zone. Should this be successful, and should the city decide in the future to add more zoning like this, you could, I mean, in our sort of vision was that this is not just pro-port, it really is focused on what kind of industrial property you want to have. If the city evolves its zoning standards for this zone, they can be modeled after this agreement, then it's really consistent. And that was sort of, I think, Mitch's suggestions. Let's not think of what's good for the port. If we were gonna move this zone forward, evolve it, what would it look like? And that's really how we've arrived at these standards. They include things like better screening of trash facilities and loading docks in the rear and things that make industrial properties more transitionable tenant to tenant rather than one building that looks like something very specific that one tenant would accept but the next wouldn't. Very, very forward looking. And in the long process, we took the time to work with staff to figure out, let's write it like a zoning code as opposed to a bunch of variances. It's not a bunch of variances, it's probably a better way to describe it.
And just, for the record, Tim talked about how long that this has been going on, and I was part of the review process when the initial design standards came. We started talking about it 6-7 years ago, at least, so.
Think of it as like a site-specific zoning code, is what it amounts to. It's a zoning code that just applies to this specific property that is subject to this development agreement. I know you hear the notion that you can't spot zone.
Right.
Well, actually, you can't. Well, it depends what you mean by spot zone. You actually can have a very small zoning district as long as there's a rational reason to do it. So it's actually kind of a little bit of an overstatement to say you can't have a very small area in a zone district, and so this isn't even that small.
No,
so.
it's not.
And I would suggest that really would not come up as an issue. This is 120 plus acres. It's hard to call that a spot.
Yeah. There are other mechanisms that are like this. They're all done by ordinance. We could have done a sub-area plan. We could have done a couple of other different types of mechanisms. I think one example that exists now and still has some construction to do out in East Vancouver, it's an ordinance. The property owner self-imposed design standards that were in excess of what the municipality required, which is an ideal situation when you have an owner that's stepping up and saying, we're going to make a very special place, and we appreciate the flexibility that your code provides. However, we're going to step up and do something on our own. I believe at the Columbia Tech Center, I can't remember, it was an ordinance, and it's got a design review committee. It's all private, and if you're ever out in that project between 164th and 192nd, north and south of Mill Plain, I'm not saying the design standards are all the same, but that is a project where there are design standards that are in excess of what the municipality requires, and the mechanism for enforcing them is private, and this is similar.
One of the things that it's less technical and more strategic. Having a development group like this effect replaces the city zoning code. It shortens the due diligence time for new tenants who aren't used to developing. Somebody who has a business wants to locate here, you don't have to say, here, go look up the code. You say, here's a set of standards. If you meet what's in this set of development agreement, which is recorded against the property, if you comply with this, your use is described, you can develop here. My experience with the Tech Center and other projects similar to that, it realistically gives the tenant or the purchaser a much greater level of security. They don't have to navigate all the varying places in the ordinance. We kind of bring it all together for them and say, you meet this, you can locate here, and get them to commit more quickly. Those decisions are fragile the longer they last. We see things at Columbia Tech Center, for example, we see 90-day due diligence, not 180 or 360-day due diligence. It's just a very effective way to progress purchase decisions and development decisions, which will be good, I think, for the Port of
Thank you. Paul?
I just wanted to mention that that was one of the early standards that was talked about in the public process was how do we make this attractive? How do we make this so that an employer would want to come here and not have to confront a 3-year design cycle? Because quite frankly, there are a lot of businesses that rather than confront a 3-year cycle are going to have been operating in Tennessee for 2 of those years. So there's tremendous work here, and I'm deeply impressed by the thought and the kind of forward-looking that has gone on with city staff and McKay and Esposito and the port staff, and also the public process that Richard was involved in, and Martha. You've been in all of those meetings. I'm a relative newcomer. I started going to them in 2007. It's hard for me to express how thrilled I am to see this kind of result come to fruition. This is more than I actually hoped for. And I would guess, maybe I'm wrong, but you're going to have pads ready by sometime this spring, right?
Yeah, we're in the midst of, I mean, we can put lots and lot lines all together right now. And then, as I mentioned, we're getting ready to move forward on building 15.
The street in phase 1 is already constructed.
Yeah, so we've got pad-ready sites now, as soon as we have our development agreement.
And so then you're looking at a cycle from, this is something I think I want to do, let me start my due diligence, to turnkey ready that looks more like 6 months than 3 years. And that's very competitive with almost any place else you can think of in terms of I want to start my business. I want new capacity. I need new capacity. How long is it going to take? That 6 months is very competitive.
I would think we'd be shorter than 6 months, wouldn't we? Once the actual pads are ready, the utilities are there, everything else, you're basically down to staff reviews.
Yep. Especially if they go through design review, and then there's, a lot less that I have to start looking at.
One of the things I'm kind of track more than a dozen economic development interest groups on LinkedIn, and one of the topics of discussion over the past couple of years has been what they call virtual buildings, which is where you take a rough design of a building and you get as close to permitting the building as you can, so that somebody can come in and say, pull that one off the shelf, and you're already most of the way toward through your whole permit process. You've even got most of the design work done. In trying to do that, they're trying to get to a 6-month timeline.
Other questions for Mitch? Proponents? Okay, so it'll be back to us on the 11th with the public hearing.
Yep, I was just going to say that's the next item on the agenda is just that we'll have the hearing March 11th at 7 o'clock.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for being here this evening. So Mitch, that kind of takes care of your new business piece as well.
Yes.
Done, finished, out of here, go home.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to new business, item B, Finance Department. Jennifer, you're up.
I don't have any questions.
She's so short.
Starting, so apologize for that. I'm going to start off with the 2012 fourth quarter update. Basically, it's 2012 in a nutshell. It's the whole year, not just the fourth quarter. For the general and street funds first, the fourth quarter revenues concluded at 96.3% of what we budgeted. Property taxes came in higher than we budgeted at 101.9% of the budgeted amount. And then overall revenue is up 2.1% from 11 at the same time.
But we're still off 3.7% off of budgeted amounts.
Correct. So for the visual, the fourth quarter, again, that's the whole year, broken out by the revenue sources. Just kind of the overview. You can see that the property taxes were down a little bit compared from 12 to 11, which was expected with the decline in the AV. Sales tax was actually 5.6% higher between the two years, which is positive. There's a couple, the state and federal grants, that's all dependent upon what we apply and get for, so that varies from year to year. But overall, we came in pretty close to what we budgeted for. The miscellaneous sales, you may notice at $128,000, that's where the revenue for the wildland fires kind of got clumped into, is just a miscellaneous revenue code. In the past, we've reduced the expense, which is not proper accounting, so we do need to account for it as revenue, not a expenditure deduction. The expenditures came in under budget for the general and street funds at about 95%. Broken out by department, again, just as a reminder, the election costs for the council are what skewed your expenditures for 12. We didn't get the invoices in time to apply them to the proper year. And then the fire is over due to the wildland fires, which that revenue offsets. So they truly were within their budget, as going to the wildlands is cost neutral. And we actually make money on our rigs for mileage. But overall, most departments came in as expected. Human resources, I think, was a little under with, we had some extra professional service money just in case with some of the union negotiations that we had going last year. So that's why that looks like it came in so far under budget. And then finance was with the restructuring, so that was anticipated. But overall,
Question.
yes,
Yeah, education reimbursement, that falls under human resources, doesn't it?
correct.
Okay.
And we didn't do the full amount of that either.
Yeah, okay, so we over budgeted a bit on that one.
With that being the first year, we didn't know who was going to apply. Now that we know who's has applied for it, we are able to budget for that much easier. The utility funds, the water sewer revenues were at 108% of the budget. Stormwater revenues were at 112 once we adjusted for the capital expenditures. The expenditures, they came in right about 100% as well for water, sewer, and stormwater. So the visual for those. And again, with the revenue side, that's all part of the rate study analysis where we evened them out. So some years we're going to be higher and some years we're going to be a little bit lower just to even out the increases. But overall, we came in pretty much as expected. The other revenue line item for stormwater, just as a refresher, that was how we were going to track the capital expenditures, but instead we decided to take it back to Fund 413, which is the bond fund, which is easier to track. That way it doesn't skew their annual numbers. Here's a spreadsheet everybody loves. I'm going to have Megan come up with a better way of doing this next year, but keeping in tradition for 12, I kept it the same so that the year would be all the same. As you can see, our surplus in the general street and fire fund, we ended the year a little bit better than I last reported. This has all the fine tuning, so this should be the final numbers. So we ended with a surplus of $137,000. And then most funds, unless they're debt funds or capital projects, are also where we budgeted. Obviously, the 413 fund, which has a $1.8 million, what looks like a deficit, is the spending of the bond funds. Any questions on that portion? Okay, our LGIP, Local Government Investment Pool, those are our monstrous earnings for the year, broken out by month. They're very liquid. We can request money today and get it tomorrow, so that's why the rates are a little bit lower. We made a total of about $20,000 across all funds.
Those are APRs, annualized percentage rates, or an actual monthly rate?
Those are the actual monthly rates.
Excellent.
And that's where we're at on the longer term bonds for the investment update. We're down to about $8.5 million in our portfolio, and that's with the bond funds coming due as we anticipated every 6 months to keep the funds available for capital projects. So all in all, we're within pretty close to our budgeted amounts. It was a pretty good year, and looking forward to seeing how we do this year.
Questions from council? Paul?
No, go ahead.
Okay, mine's quick. I was just wondering if we could get an updated forecast, the sheet that we saw for multiple years from the retreat.
Okay,
Just wondering if we could get that updated and get it sent out again.
I can do that.
Actuals. Thank you.
I was just going to make a comment that I frankly find it amazing that between the finance staff and the mayor and the director level staff, that you can come in so close to the number so consistently. I find that truly remarkable.
Other questions, comments? So Jennifer, on looking at 13, obviously I'm not too concerned with the amount that we came in under budget on expenditures. That's what we're continually trying to do is come in under those numbers. On the 3.5% that we were off in regards to revenues, does any of that information cause you any heartache for the 13 budget in wanting to rework some of those over what the approved budget was?
Probably not at this point. I need to regroup on the state shared revenues and see what's going on with some of those types. But those actually came in where we anticipated, so that threw me a little bit. I thought they were going to be a little lower.
You're not done yet, so.
For 12, though. So for 13, I want to revisit that, and then also just see where sales tax is hitting compared to last year. I haven't looked at that yet for January to see where the year's headed, but I think we'll be okay, but I'll continue to monitor it and let you know how things are looking at probably the second quarter, because the first one we won't have property taxes.
Okay.
Every month I see the county-wide sales tax numbers for public facilities district that I serve as a general counsel for. And they've been actually, in the 1 month they've actually been up compared to 2012, so that should give you a little comfort. But what was the cause of, being 3.5% off? I missed kind of what revenue sources really contributed to that.
Had permits in there, permits and fees were,
Permits and fees mostly.
The one that came in a little low was the indirect cost recovery, and that's because we overcharged last quarter of 11, so I had to true it up the beginning of 12, so it was just in reserves.
So that.
So that threw it a little
that's really
bit.
kind of an accounting, not so much a,
But for the most part, property taxes, the sales taxes, those were all at or above budget.
interest and rents. Of course, that's not a big component.
Right.
General government charges, a little bit low.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's a moving target
Yeah.
with the budget. We do the best we can to find the right spot, but they're always off just a little bit.
Okay.
any other items for Jen on the quarterly report? So 2012 is done.
Well, the financials aren't done yet, but yes.
Right away. Okay, update on your department.
All right. So in keeping with, I believe HR came last week. So look at that, I started the questions every time. In keeping with giving the council updates on what our department is up to, we decided to have me come tonight since I was here. There's going to be 3 areas that we'll go over. The finance program areas, our department staffing, and then what we have on the list as our goals and projects for 2013. We broke the program areas into different buckets of finance. The first one being the accounting, auditing, and financial reporting, and then budgeting and forecasting. Some of the customer service areas being at the front counter, we kind of encompass a lot of customer service. Debt management, treasury and investment management, the city clerk duties, and then there's kind of an other category as well. In the accounting, auditing, and financial reporting, basically that's the day-to-day receipting, accounts payable, payroll, all those types of accounting functions. And then also encompassed in that is the annual financial reporting that our financials are due May 30th, roughly. We'll have our state audit in August, so we cover that in this area as well. Bank reconciliations are done monthly to ensure that we can do our cash management portion in the other section. So just kind of all those accounting functions that we do day to day. The local improvement districts, they have debt against them as well, so they kind of jump into a couple buckets. But just the everyday accounting, annual accounting information is here. Some of them, I guess what I should have backed up and said, unless it's otherwise marked, all of these are required by a state law, accounting practice, accounting standard, or by the state auditor's office. So asset tracking is something that has been required by the state auditors. Grant tracking is required federally, those types of things. So there are a few that you'll see in the next couple slides that aren't required that we did identify. But for the most part, if it's not otherwise marked, then it is required by some state, local, or federal or state auditor requirement. For budgeting and forecasting, we do our annual budget process, which includes the ad valorem, property taxes, and then the annual revenue and expenditure estimates. The budget tracking tool that we use is a quarterly reporting to council. Obviously, we go through it monthly as well as a staff level, but we bring that to you quarterly. If a supplemental budget is required, then we would bring that forward as well. And then the long-term forecasting that we've done at the annual retreats is a discretionary practice that's not necessarily required by any statute or accounting principle, but it is a best practice. Our customer service areas, We do the utility billing and receipting, which generates a lot of phone traffic and foot traffic here at City Hall. We handle the dog fines and licensing for animal control. The business licensing isn't as labor intensive as it used to be. The state is the lead and the city monitors. We handle the solicitor licensing process with the assistance of Human Resources in the police department. We do the community room rentals, special event application processing. And then we also have kind of the general reception area, as Rachel's the first person that people typically see when they come in. We don't necessarily have to have somebody there, but it is nice to have someone that can direct folks to, a lot of times we have to explain where the courthouse is because people are looking for the other end of C Street. They get a little turned around. So we not only direct folks within City Hall, but within city limits. And then Rachel has actually gone through class to be a notary, so we do have that option at City Hall again. But that is a discretionary function as well.
Do we make that available to the public?
We do.
Do we charge for it?
We do not.
Really?
Yeah, both here and through the police department, both.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to keep that in mind.
It does get used.
I was gonna say, that's good.
Debt management's pretty self-explanatory, but we do have various forms of debt. We have the bond debt that we have, the revenue bonds. We have general purpose, general obligation bonds. We have public work trust fund loans. I think that's about it. And they all have various payments throughout the year that we have to track and make sure that we wire money where it needs to go when it's due. So it's not too cumbersome, but we just have a spreadsheet and we follow it and make sure it gets done. Part of that would also be working with our bond council, on if there's any refinancing opportunities. They've been good about letting us know, such as the police department building we just recently refinanced. Treasury and investment management, basically we do the cash management monthly for flow, and any access we're able to put into the local government investment pool, or if it's a long-term opportunity, long-term being 2 to 5 years, not really long-term, but longer than the LGIP. We do have some longer bonds for higher interest rates. The city clerk portion of finance, we handle citywide public records requests, making sure that we respond within the five days with either an extension for a time frame or with the requested information. Records retention schedules, we're required to maintain those as well to ensure we're purging information and keeping the appropriate information as well. And then we're also responsible for keeping the code up to date. And Rose has been helping with that lately, which is very helpful.
How much staff time is spent on public records requests? Do you keep track of that per year? Because I know they do in Vancouver, because we want to show the legislature how much of a...
I haven't been time tracking, but we do keep the actual, obviously, the log of requests. I need some wood to knock on. It hasn't been horrible. There have been a couple instances where I think we're being used as the discovery tactic in some lawsuits, but it hasn't been excessively overburdensome at this point. But again, knocking on wood. But yet again, you still have to track them and make sure you respond, so it does take up time when we do get them. Other areas that fall under finance, oops, sorry, do you have a question?
No, I thought you were done, so I've got a question when you finish.
Okay. Some of the other areas that fall into the finance department, information technology, IT falls into our area. It's not necessarily required, but it is essential for the city to function. We use the computer system every day. Contract management is helpful and required by the state auditors. We've been working with Public Works to have an actual linkable, trackable contract list, which has been very nice. And then I'm the risk management backup for Jeanette. So while she's on vacation, I get to work with WCIA on anything that comes up. So for all those duties that we have in the finance department, we have myself, 2 accountants, an accounting specialist, and 2 clerks to handle that. So we have a great team. We were working very hard. We work well together, and it's been a lot of fun.
Currently, you're down 1. You interviewed today?
We interview next Monday. We are down 1 accountant. We are looking for the perfect fit, and we are bound and determined to find it. We'll have 3 folks interview next Monday. And then we'll have them all lined up, hopefully, to start when Jeanette gets back. Our department goals for 2013, the cost of service study with Public Works is one of our top priorities. I believe the RFP is either out or will be out shortly for that. Part of that will be ensuring that our data is appropriate and what they need to actually do the study. So we'll be spending some time to make sure our accounts are all accurate and ready to go and in the format that they need. One of the goals that I've had since I started is the Government Finance Officer Association has the Distinguished Budget Award, and I'd like to get our budget up to par to be able to get that award. So we're going to start prepping for that this year. Once we're fully staffed, it'll be much easier to do fully staffed, I think. Some of the policies and procedures we want to update. There's several financial policies that we need to work on, not fixed asset, small and attractive asset policies, ensuring that we have a list of what the city owns, some of those types of things. The IT transition is a goal for this year, to transition to the future for what we're going to do with that. And then our annual clean audit is definitely a top priority this year as well. That's it.
Dave?
Do you have a checklist that you use to prepare for the audit?
They provide us with a list of items that they look at. It kind of changes from year to year. Basically, some of the things that they always ask for are minutes, contract listings, financial statements, any changes in the budget throughout the year, so any supplemental budgets that we've done. We just kind of have a tickler file that we keep, or they'll send a letter with a list of stuff that they request. But some of those main things stay the same every year.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're now at that opportunity in the agenda, once again, for anyone from the public that would like to address council. Richard.
Richard Hamby, Washougal. Just briefly, I think that especially Tim Schauer really covered the development agreement for the Steigerwald Commerce Center pretty well, but this is sure the exact type of development that this community needs. We need more opportunities for revenue that come into the city, more opportunities for employment for the local people, though, so that everybody isn't driving somewhere else to make a living. There really has been an awful lot of public involvement in that development standard document over actually beyond the terms of some of the commissioners that are existing at the port right now. It was started a long time ago. A lot of people put their ideas into it, and so I was glad to see that Councilman Boger found that it was a good document from your standpoint. That was a good perspective, but it's sure what we need.
Thank you, Richard.
I think there's just one master development agreement floating around, and they just take paragraphs from it.
Let's hope whoever wrote it the first time got the money for it.
Right.
Stolen off of. Anyone else from the public that would like to address council? Okay. Larry, good to see you back.
Yes.
Under Mayor's report, I've got just a couple of items for you. One, just a reminder that next Monday, the first Monday, we will not be here. We will be starting our rotation into our new meeting schedule. So your schedule at the bottom of the agendas, starting with March 11th, is correct. Workshop at 5 o'clock, followed by council at 7 p.m., and then out to the 25th, and then into April. So a little bit of changes there. In addition to, on staffing, in addition to Jennifer's hire that she has in finance, I believe we've also made Dave a offer to a young man for a position within the police department, one of our new officers.
Yes, probably a conditional offer pending all of the background.
So we're hoping he'll be sworn in the very first part of March as well, which it's his Friday, isn't it?
Yeah,
How
it should
quickly
be coming
things
up pretty
fly.
soon. Should be soon.
Comes to us from the Battleground Police Department by way of Hawaii. Was with Battleground for a few years and then moved to Hawaii for some other pursuits and decided to come back this direction. And
Was there rain or something?
I don't know. I haven't heard completely. We'll all have something to talk to him
Was he in
about.
law enforcement in Hawaii, or?
No, he was originally up in Port Townsend, I believe. Hawaii was something completely different. From what I understand, a
I don't
dream
know.
that he and his wife had that didn't exactly work out the way they thought it was going to. So they came back, and we were doing the background investigations and stuff. Battleground said, "Well, if you don't hire him, please let us know. We'll hire him back." So we took him instead. So hopefully we'll have him here to be introduced to everybody. And then last couple of items we do have this evening for anybody that hasn't had dinner yet. Twilight's doing their fundraiser for the West Columbia Gorge Humane Society this evening. 10% of everything they've got going, up to 8:30 at the Camas one, 10 o'clock over in Vancouver. And then Dave, you've got an RFA meeting tomorrow.
Yes, 5:30. Decision time.
Cool.
Do we or do we not?
5:30 Camas Council Chambers.
Yes. Thank you.
That's all that I've got. Items from council? Paul?
Local Connections meets tomorrow morning at 8:20 at the Camas Bike and Sports Shop. If you haven't been to one of those meetings, they're interesting. It's a group of local business people that get together to talk about promoting Camas and Washougal. I find it a particularly interesting group. There is a elected official training tomorrow evening in the Kelso City Hall that I'm going to go to, that's put on by WCIA, the Washington
Cities Insurance Authority.
that will help us stay out of liability trouble. Before the next council meeting, there will be a Regional Transportation Commission meeting on March 5th at 6 at the commissioners' meeting room on the 6th floor of the county building, downtown Vancouver. The agenda is not out yet. I will go as the alternate. What else? That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other items from council? Dave?
Our new rules for the council set up a once a quarter, a Saturday town hall. Proposed one for 9 March, and like to take up the topic of the CRC.
Could we push it at least a week?
So how does that work? 'Cause, I mean, that's,
I can go a week later. The only weekend I am not available in March is Easter weekend and this next weekend. So I can do any weekend in March then.
I can't do the 16th.
Oh, okay.
What about the 23rd?
23rd works for me.
When's Easter?
I'm gonna be out of state on the 23rd for 2 days for a search and rescue exercise with Civil Air Patrol.
When is Easter, do
How
you
is
know?
that?
Last week.
31st.
Okay.
Yeah, how's
Is
that?
it times on this?
Say again?
The times?
We left times and dates pretty flexible.
Kind of open?
Time, date, and location is at the discretion
Does
of
it
the
have
council.
to be on a Saturday?
The rules say Saturday, but you
Saturday.
could suspend your rules and you could hold it anytime you would like. I think the idea was that
Yeah.
Saturday is a
Public.
weekend for,
Kind of a different time frame for them.
for the public. Mhm.
Well, what was there a problem with the 9th?
It's a problem for me.
So we maybe
Not
need to,
necess-
I would suggest that we maybe plan those dates, because I don't really have a lot going on in March except on the 16th, so. I don't mean to sound like I have some whole social calendar.
You're prepping for St. Patrick's Day a day early.
Oh, right, yeah,
Ah.
totally. It's just a baby shower at my house, so, I mean, they could, I guess, carry on, and I could just not be there. As long as they clean, I mean,
In the morning?
yeah, it's like at 10.
So
Right,
Paul's
yeah.
the 9th just not open for you at all? Or?
Well, if I had to, it's not on my calendar, but I've got something I was planning on doing. If absolutely necessary, I suppose I can push that.
And then there's Easter, right? So then,
Yeah,
Just a
Easter is the
couple of hours,
30th and
like in the morning,
31st.
or-
Yeah.
well, what about
You're
the,
not available the 23rd. You're not available the 16th, so
what about the 30th? I mean, is
that's
that?
Easter weekend.
That's Easter week.
I'll be in California.
Yeah, so.
Not a good idea.
So after this, can we then should we then pick future town hall meeting dates, so we kind of
Paul,
plan a little better?
what date was it that you said you might be able to accommodate?
If I have to, I can do the 9th, but I'm frankly also concerned that spending an entire public session on CRC when we really don't have anything to say about it.
Oh, I think the idea is to hear from the public.
Yeah, but
Does that necessarily, we don't necessarily have to spend the whole session on the CRC.
No, what we talked about doing, if my memory is correct, what we talked about doing is having a topic for the town hall meetings that basically kind of got things started and then go into general questions, answers,
else
whatever
we
it
need
is that
to do,
anybody
yeah.
from the public would care to.
That was my understanding too. I thought it was a
it's-
great idea.
It's something that will generate some interest, perhaps. I've actually kind of not been, kind of intentionally kept out of that issue, but
exactly.
I still think I need to be a full-service councilman, and if I think it's in the interest of my constituents that they be heard on this issue, I'm willing to have that as a topic. First of all, it might be a nice way to start the tradition of these Saturday town halls, because I bet that one will get a few people there.
That's a good point.
Let's see.
I mean, I frankly would be much more interested in talking about budget or utilities or something that's clearly a Washougal issue. My problem with CRC is that, I mean, other than sitting there and being a therapist, listening to people, we have no effect on the outcome.
I'm not sure that's true. Depends on how the vote comes down.
My understanding is that the legislatures in the two states and the federal government are the only ones who have any say on an Interstate 5 project.
That undoubtedly is true. However,
And
we can provide input about how people feel about that.
well, but I don't see that we're performing a useful function that way. If they want to provide input, then they can certainly get in touch with Ann Rivers and Liz Pike and their other legislators, whether they're 14th or 20th. But I just don't see that there's a useful service served by having people come talk to us so that we can kind of maybe talk to our legislators about what they talk to us about. It seems to me that's way too third hand.
Well, then I would propose that we do a resolution.
Well, that's exactly what I mean, is the resolution is way too third hand. We're back to doing a resolution on the Arizona immigration law.
Well, this is a little different than that, Paul. I mean, it's a
but-
pending decision that the state legislature, state of Washington legislature is considering. It's coming through right about now. And I think, hearing from a small city that might be impacted by it is something that I think they might consider relevant. So, and I agree with you on the Arizona immigration law. I didn't, think that was the right thing to do. But
The reason I chose that example, if I can finish, is because it really didn't matter at all what we said about the Arizona immigration law. We could as much be talking about a Star Trek convention.
I disagree.
And in a large measure, what we have to say about CRC is of the same character. On the other hand, if we want to talk about something that has actual import to the city of Washougal, then if we want to talk about a transportation project, let's talk about SR 14 Phase 2 and 32nd Street and a new railroad crossing.
Let's do that too.
Or let's talk about utilities again, or what the budget means in terms of, I've had several people ask me, what do you mean the budget falls into a black hole in 2015?
We can do all of that, Paul, but
Wow.
two of the three county commissioners have asked for input from the cities on this particular issue. I think we should give it to them. I think we ought to get it off our chest. There are a lot of people that feel very strongly about this on both sides of the issue. Let's let them know what the divide is down here.
And frankly, I wouldn't mind a little presentation on it because I have kind of stayed out of this because of my day job, but I would like to actually hear, I'd like to hear the pro side and I'd like to hear the con side on it in a succinct
And the idea that
15-minute presentation.
the Arizona issue didn't affect us, the Arizona law was merely a solution to a problem that we share here. This is one of the most egregious areas for illegal immigration based on the policy we have on driver's licenses. So we have the problem along with New Mexico, and this was a solution that was brought up by another state. I think it was an excellent idea to say to the people here, we support that solution. Let's bring it here. I'm sorry they didn't do it.
You mentioned a request from the commissioners. Have we received something from the commissioners
No.
asking for input?
No,
I haven't.
No, it was in the newspaper.
I guess I've got a couple of questions, but one of them would be if we move forward in a town hall type discussion with some presentations, who do we invite to make the presentations? I don't think we've got anybody here within the city that has the expertise on that side. I'm sure that either the CRC or Department of Transportation, depending on schedules, could supply somebody for their portion of the presentation, but do we just go off of that and just what the what the
Wherever we
current
can
plan
get,
is.
I mean, we can, there are plenty of people that are, I think would be willing to come talk to us about that on both sides.
I don't think we'll have any trouble scaring up somebody to do that.
Well, let's, okay, so,
Have to jump on it
You
tomorrow
know,
and see who's
and
available.
we
for
could,
the
we could
night.
actually make it a broader topic, just transportation. Include Highway 14, include the CRC. And
certainly can.
And throw 32nd Street in there too. Great idea, Paul.
I know maybe something for the first one, you know, we may carve out just to be safe a 3-hour period rather than a 2-hour period if we've got a number of items in there. It's all gonna depend on how many folks show up.
Right.
Well, I'd like to get a little indication as from the other two who haven't spoken out as to whether you want to hear whether you want to have a meeting on CRC.
I do. It's my understanding that other small cities are doing this as well, having open houses or town hall meetings.
Battleground's
to-
on Thursday.
Battleground, correct. And so I think it's entirely appropriate to hear from our citizens because it does affect us. And particularly if they toll I-5 and all the traffic sort of moves our way on 205. I know a lot of people out here work in Portland off the 205, so this could potentially affect us out here. I would definitely like to hear from people.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would love to more. I just would like to be there. So,
So date and time?
Well, I'm hearing March 9th. I want to make sure I understand that the council's asking for the staff to facilitate some presentations on what's going on Highway 14, walk through our transportation capital facilities plan perhaps, just as a refresher or an update. We have that information available to us. It wouldn't be I just wanted to make sure I can meet your expectations in a couple
Well, and
weeks.
then you have
We
to
weren't planning on this.
call someone from the CRC and then.
Right.
Let's, why don't we make a call in the morning to John Williams over in Battleground and see how they're building theirs, if they're making.
Yeah,
us
they're doing
part
an
of
open
that.
house, so I'm not, someone must
Kind of a town
be
hall.
there to provide information if it follows the typical sort of a thing. But we want to have that topic treated, and then generally a refreshing presentation, it sounds like, on
Major
what
transportation
are the
items.
major priority transportation projects in Washougal, and are there any updates on those? And there's a couple I suppose there's a couple minor updates on it, and it'll just be a refresher. So
Yeah.
that won't be very difficult.
Yeah, a kind of a review of the transportation improvement plan. And at this point, we don't have enough really planning or hard stuff on SR 14. It's going to be a lot of kind of hand waving on that.
We have the options that we looked at, and we sort
Right.
of landed on this one option, which has all kinds of sub-options. And there is an update on, we're asking for money,
We have made an ask, a specific
an
ask
ask,
of the
but-
legislature.
but yeah, it won't take long, and sure, we can provide an update on our transportation capital facilities plan. It's always good to have that out in front of us, and be reminded about what we're hoping to accomplish with that. And
As people that follow my Facebook, I had a hike on the dike yesterday afternoon, and the topic of Highway 14 came up. And, when I got appointed to the council, one of my main goals was to work with the legislators to get that pushed forward. But one of the things that I hadn't considered as fully as I should have is what is the effect of Highway 14 on severing Washougal's connection with its waterfront? Same thing that happened in Vancouver with their Boise Cascade property. And I would like to kind of have that issue presented to me so I can think about that some more.
yeah, the PED tunnel on this end of town, the PED tunnel was our resolution to that. Vancouver's similarly doing that, but other than that,
No.
Well, that,
You also got Captain William Clark Park, all the parking down there, all the access there that makes it through 27th Street.
We also went to a lot of trouble to fight through the Second Street crossing. The original design on SR 14,
Right.
Second Street did not cross underneath SR 14. And we got that, and when they came back to us with their initial plan, there were no sidewalks on Second Street.
Just
So,
want to make sure that CRC doesn't get lost in the shuffle of all of these topics.
We got plenty to talk about, I think.
Yeah. I think that'll be out there as well. So if I understand, and not that we've got to go their direction, Battleground, I know they're limiting comment during that meeting just to Battleground residents only in regards to CRC. Is that, do you want to do that as well?
Where's Don English? Is that constitutional?
Sure. It's your meeting, you can limit as much as you want. You don't have to have any input whatsoever, so anything beyond that is, it's your pleasure.
Who was suggesting that we might give people from Washougal more time? Was it you, Dave?
I think on this topic,
Yeah.
I'm hearing that the council wants to hear from Washougal residents about that project. If that's your goal, I would assume you would want to make sure there was adequate time for your specific constituents to be able to address you. There's the potential, I think, because of the regional significance of the project and because there are folks on both sides of the issue that are well versed on this project and their concerns that potentially would come and take some time. So it could compromise your opportunity to hear from your specific constituents.
Why don't we limit it to Washougal residents or urban growth boundary residents? We don't want to forget them. People that live in the inside our UGA.
WUGA.
Yeah. And then if there aren't a lot of people there, we could open it up to
Right.
others.
I'd also had heard, I can't remember who mentioned it, that sort of hearing a pro and con. We can have the project come, and some might categorize the project as being the pro, whether it's the CRC team that comes or how I'll talk to John, and we'll figure that part out, and hopefully someone can be available for Saturday, March 9th. Is there interest in hearing the other side in an organized way? I had thought I had heard someone say that maybe.
I just don't know how you do that.
I don't know. It was.
Well, yeah,
Did you,
I mean,
Councilman Boger?
yeah, there's some clear opposition to it.
Is there
more
an
credible.
organization like that's formal, like a nonprofit or something like that that's
I don't know.
organized around
See,
it?
I don't believe there is, and I think that's one of the reasons that Battleground had in limiting theirs just to their own community residents is that, you know, they didn't, if they truly wanted to hear from their residents and not have anything else to loot, okay, if I'm gonna judge something off of here and, you know, talk about potentially a resolution or anything that we're gonna go talk about, it doesn't do me a lot of good to have folks from all through the other areas. The CRC is, I hate to categorize it that way. The project itself is the project, and obviously has clear information, that type of stuff in regards to what the current project is that is proposed. I've not heard anything other than factions that have been out there doing the other side. Maybe it's okay that you just get the information on what the project is and then see, because truly that's what you, well, I'm gonna presuppose for the council, I would think that that's what you wanna hear is feedback. based on
I
what
would
the
like to
project
hear
is.
an articulate contra position as well.
why don't you find one for
Where,
us?
where do you find that, though? I mean, I've heard everything clear across the board.
Tiffany Couch has done a lot of work on this.
David Madore, I think, is a good source to find somebody. I don't think he should be involved in the presentation itself,
No.
I don't,
but I think he could recommend somebody. He's been the lightning rod on that issue.
oh, there's no doubt. I wanna make sure if you've got somebody making a presentation, that it's someone credible that can make a presentation. I've been in too many of them so far with the same people that 2 weeks later, their numbers completely change. It's $3 million, now it's 8, now it's $10 billion, and that's,
I don't think we're gonna be talking so much about dollars and cents here as we are, what's the intent of the project, what's the scope of the project, why do we need this?
I agree with the mayor that that's been a
that brings it
moving
back to the
target, too.
CRC.
That I've been to a lot of meetings on this.
Yeah, but
And-
Paul, you can't just have a one-sided presentation, you need both sides.
Well, I've been to 3 public outreach meetings conducted by CRC in which the public spoke. CRC did not speak. And I agree with the mayor that one of the problems is that you keep getting, frankly, wrong information from people. People misunderstand the project. They do not have the facts. And when they don't have them, they're quite happy to make them up. And the interesting thing is they make up different facts every time they speak.
Well, I found the CRC to be guilty of that.
And, well, I haven't heard a CRC presentation. I mean, I've looked at the DVD and read the packet, or about 100-page packet. There's a much more elaborate one than that. But there is a difficulty in finding a credible source on, I mean, Tiffany Couch has spent some time on the accounting, but I don't think she has any expertise in engineering or traffic design.
Well, credibility is often in the eyes of the beholder, and
Well, it just, you know, if you can't come up with the same story 3 times in a row,
well,
it's not credible.
I've heard that also, as Councilmember Shoemaker says. That's also been been something that's a charge that's leveled against the CRC as well. So I just, you know, it doesn't really matter who it is. Tiffany Couch is who came to mind. I do not particularly want a one-sided presentation. There is a contra-argument to this. I haven't heard it. I haven't been involved in this issue, but you know, I would leave it to the administrator's discretion to come up with something.
Am I to understand that you're bringing forth a resolution at some point?
I think it would be a good idea, one way or the other. Let people know where we stand.
So the fact that you want to bring forth a resolution might be important to let the public know that there's a potential for a resolution. And, you know, this is a statement made by your council, and if you would like to weigh in on the content of the statement, or if there should be a statement or not, this would be a great time to do so.
Excellent point.
It
Whether
may be-
you're agreed with the CRC or not, we might not even get into, you know, schematics of the bridge, or, you know, who supports it and who doesn't. But do you want your council to bring forth a resolution? That
Right, and if
might be
I hear from the public that
more-
they do not want us to do it, I would suggest that we don't do it.
I would love to hear that. I would love to hear our public come and talk to us and tell us yes or no.
I think it's an excellent use of this particular vehicle that we came up with.
Well, I agree.
It's just that, you know,
We may not be able to answer everybody's questions. That's okay.
well, I think some of these
We won't.
questions-
We won't.
I think some of these questions are unanswerable.
Right.
But it does
You
give
know,
us a chance to get our ears open.
there's,
Yeah.
well, and like I say, I've not been involved in the issue at all, and I would like to, since it is coming down to, this is really, I think in the next couple of months, we're coming down to yes or no. I mean, if there's no financing package that makes it through the Washington legislature, it probably isn't gonna happen, at least in its current form. That's about all I know about it. And so I think this is a critical time for us to consider this.
Yeah, and I'm even in inviting CRC, and I'm not, obviously, I guess you'd have to call me proponent of the project. What I'm looking for is not necessarily individuals to come in to sell us one side or the other on it. What I was looking for is somebody to come in and start the dialogue of, this is what the current project is, this is what it contains. There we go. I realize it's a little naive to believe that any folks off the CRC aren't probably charged with bringing forth something that eventually is going to be palatable to both states and the federal government to fund as well. But
My sense would be,
I'm not looking for a cheerleading thing. I'm looking for a,
Right, but
what
Just
is the
facts,
project?
just facts.
somebody who can lay out the locally preferred alternative.
what the process is moving forward, what the current status is, what's happening in the legislature. The project team will know all of that, and I believe would present that on a fact-based scenario, so it's not a pro or contra argument,
I would think they would have to.
right?
They may not. They may be willing to come to a council meeting and give a presentation to council, but I wonder if they would be willing to come to
Well, we can couch it that way
open
as
house
well.
on a Saturday. I mean, I don't know.
Well, it's a council meeting. I mean, it is a council meeting. Your attendance is voluntary, so, yeah, I think, we're giving them
Do we have
less than
to-
2 weeks' notice, so.
Do we have to have it in March? I mean, should we pick maybe a backup date in April, if that's
I think
too?
on this particular topic,
Needs to
the
be
timing is
now.
critical.
Yeah.
However, on other topics, like
Yeah.
long-term,
Trust.
transportation plans for the next 15 to 20 years, maybe that could be pushed back to, the next quarter. But,
I think we're willing to give a try to March 9th.
Right.
Pending, making sure that we can get the right individuals here to make it real.
So I think my marching orders are to get the project here, to give an overview, a fact-based overview, get advertisement out that we're going to discuss the topic, and that one of the pieces of feedback that the council wants from Washougal constituents, which we're defining as folks that reside within our city limits or our Washougal urban growth area. We would like to hear from our constituents about the project, and specifically about whether or not Washougal should pass a resolution or even consider a resolution about the project in some form. And then we'll facilitate that meeting, and when that part of the meeting is over, then we'll turn to a update presentation on our transportation CFP update and refresher, and then as well as any new information that's since the last time we talked about it.
Do we want to do it the other direction?
What I didn't hear was any effort to show the downside to the CRC project. I mean, you got the pro, but where's the con?
If you would like me to try to find someone that can do that, I can try to do that. I'm not considering the project to be the pro, but I fully understand that the perception of some will be that they will be, it's the council's meeting, so.
Tell you what, let me do some research on that, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I may be able to help with that.
I was gonna suggest that because I think Councilmember Shoemaker and probably Councilmember Freeman are the only members of this council that have taken a firm position on this project.
Yeah.
I would leave it to their discretion, perhaps, to find someone to present their views.
We can find out how much time the project thinks is necessary to provide a fact-based update on the project and what it is and where it's at and its current status and what decisions are pending and who makes them and all of that, and then find out if that's 10, 15 minutes or 12 minutes or whatever that is, and then do the same thing for the Contra, and then hear from the constituents within the city limits or the urban growth area on that. Whatever the council would like in terms of the order of the agenda, we can do our CFP first and then talk about this one, or we can start off. If we start off with this one, and it just depends on how many folks are there. I think with limiting to it to our specific constituency, I think we should be able to look at an hour or so for that, and then similarly for the other one, and have a 2-hour meeting. 9 to 11, 10 to noon.
Have we discussed format? Yeah, the earlier the better. My son is in a regional competition for the first robotics team that weekend, so I'm going to try to get out to Portland Coliseum if I can. Get to see him and his project, his team's project.
So
but anyway, if we discuss the format and how this will happen and flow, and do we, I mean, is it?
I could see this is the most informal arrangement that we have for the council in terms of how you're seated. We could receive presentations here, and then the mayor can preside over constituents coming up, and then I think it'd be pretty informal. I'm assuming that in this type of a setting there might be dialogue, perhaps more informally than even in your own public comment times. Is that a feel for what you guys were looking at?
If you want to go to a pure town hall type of setting, I mean, we'd still keep some control of the thing, but.
Right.
I would suggest the mayor sit up at the podium and the rest of the council just kind of blend in with the audience. I'm just kidding.
We could carry that mic around, so that folks don't have to come up.
That's a good idea.
The problem with this format is if we get with this arrangement, if we get a big crowd, it kind of limits the.
Exactly.
I like your idea, David, of carrying the mic around.
I can tell you that I was in a meeting last Thursday with a member of the Battleground City Council. They believe, I think he's wrong, they believe they're going to get 0 attendance in Battleground
When's the meeting?
Thursday.
Thursday evening.
I have a hard time believing that, but they've probably got a better pulse. They believe they're going to get 0. But
It could happen here as well. I mean, we ultimately might have the decision, fall on us, as to whether or not we want to consider a resolution pro or against.
Mhm.
So we pass it. But I mean, I would like to at least give an opportunity and publicize and have it be a less formal discussion. I really would like them to be able to interact with us and not really have, some of the people calling on people and
Right.
I don't know,
Someone raises
stepping
their
up to
hand.
the mic and I don't know. I mean, do we have to have?
Do you want to record it? And
Were
make
you
it
thinking
available on the
more
web?
like this, or I'm just curious.
It's a
Councilman
public
Vogel?
meeting, you have to take minutes.
it didn't have anything to do with recording.
But we could just take
Right.
minutes, right? You don't have to have a transcript, and there's no
Right.
action that's going to be taken. So, it was called to order, and
Talked about some stuff.
these
Oh,
were the
Got some
agendas,
stuff.
and then it was adjourned.
Some minor issues.
Maybe there's a
I'll
balance
volunteer.
between that hanging around, in the family room informality with, being up at the dais. If this is too constraining on space, we can array the council in kind of a V behind tables here. We can have the mics, and I could walk around, or someone could walk around with the mic, and people where they're sitting so that they don't feel like they have to come up. We just would want to be able to ensure that they're a constituent as we've defined. you know, so they would tell us where they live and.
I just would be happier if we're not behind a dais. Other than that,
Easily done.
Yep. We could try it like this, and if it's not enough room, in about 3
I
minutes.
mean, even just pushing
We could go
table
to
that
room
way
too.
and table this way.
Open it up.
Yeah. just
Opens it
tables
up.
Across the front
you-
here and.
Do you even care if you have tables,
No.
council?
Yeah, I was
No.
gonna say, why do we need a table?
Sit in chairs.
So
That's
we'll
easy
just-
enough.
We'll sit your
Yeah.
chairs right in front of the dais.
Mhm.
We can put myself and whoever's doing the presentations over here. One on
Yep.
one side, one on the other side, and somebody traveling with a microphone.
And not record it.
Oh, no, we can still record it. That'd be simple to do, and you'd have microphones everywhere. You've had that microphone.
We just have to have something to put these mics on to pick up council voices.
We've still got that one.
Yeah, I can do it.
I'm not gonna be letting more than one person talk at a time, so
I won't have to use the medicine ball that day. I'll just
let's make it easy and make it as relaxed as it can be without behind barriers or any of that stuff.
Put on your pedometer.
There you go. I'll get some points.
The only, if you're gonna record it, Rose has her preset positions all set up for the dais.
I'm not
And
too worried about that. Somebody
We can fit. That's
figure
easy.
that out.
That's easy to do. She does so that it facilitates, but right now we could be zooming in and out and moving those cameras around. You can use the presets for speedy transitions, but my anticipation would be it won't be a problem.
Let's let you all figure out, you know, and chime in on the formats, that kind of stuff, and we'll figure all the rest of it out. That's easy stuff.
The key is that we have to have folks that will be available, and if I find out, we have to give 10 days notice per your rules, so tomorrow's really the day to find out, because I think we'll have to notice the following day. Wow.
I think,
Yeah, that's,
Heather, you think we can get it in the paper?
We can notice it, and if we have to cancel it, we can cancel it. I mean, if the CRC can't come, we could still meet. It just means we won't have them presenting the project.
You get Paul Montague to come.
No, that's not.
that's definitely pro, that's not.
I would suggest that we do, if we're gonna do some other topics in addition to it, that we do those topics first and reserve the last hour or whatever is reasonable for the CRC side. I would just soon, if we're all gonna come together for this, that everybody have an opportunity to hear about our transportation plans,
Sure.
not do CRC and then have 75 of them get up and leave, 75% of them get up and leave.
Sure.
It's, as long as we've got a captured audience, let's do it that way, and hopefully Heather doesn't have to put that in the paper that we're rigging the agenda that direction. Just be nice to actually have the constituents hear the parts
It
that you
would.
really want them to hear
Yeah,
as well.
Exactly.
So. Okay, we'll make some calls first thing.
Right, and then if, I'm assuming that maybe at the end of the agenda, one of the purposes of the town hall is for constituents to engage the council on any issue that's of interest to them.
Sure.
I think that's wonderful.
I think it should be of all of the town halls.
Right.
Law of the Sea Treaty, Agenda 21, all that stuff. I'm kidding.
I know
I'm
you
kidding.
What's Agenda 21?
I don't even know.
I don't either.
Something you hear about.
I haven't.
Oh, go Google it.
Okay, so Dave, that takes care of your item as far as town hall meeting and CRC. Any other items from yourself?
Not a lot,
We're still at council comments, so
not a one, thank you.
anything from other council members? Okay, we're not here next Monday. We're not here again until the 11th. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Possibly the 9th.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I need a remote control for these. This is old school.
Here. You turn off your thing.
Oh.
Dave.